The narrative structure of Volume 1 starts in medias res, which means it occurs in the middle of the plot instead of at the very beginning. Exposition is given to us through the characters and later events. We don't get into use background or backstory until Volume 2. We start with 2 fights or altercations between you and the thugs as build-up towards the main event, including 1 chapter of a pause or rest, and 1 chapter that introduces Yu's opponent and his style, as well as the thugs a bit. Of course, during this process we are also introduced to Aizawa Masaki, who of his own volition gets tied up into the showdown, and we switch back to him throughout the volume. It should be evident that Yu Kamishiro is the main character, due to his face on the front of the volume, not to mention the legend-like saying showing him. However, Aizawa Masaki is just as important as Yu Kamishiro to the story. He either shares the main character focus with you, or he is the second main character, as in second in importance to the main character. He fulfills the wise old man archetype in storytelling, like Gandalf in The Lord of the Rings, or Obi-Wan Kenobi in Star Wars, despite not being an old man. Yu, in comparison, fulfills the naive, young, inexperienced archetype in hero's journeys much like Luke Skywalker or Frodo Baggins. Of course, this story doesn't contain magic or the Force like in those stories. Everything is much more down to earth and realistic, and yet still manages to have a high-stakes, fairly epic story by focusing on the characters' internal struggles. It manages to be just as satisfying a story as those ones for the most part. I like seeing iterations of the classic archetypes in different settings, so I found these characters to be both relatable and admirable. I really grew to love these characters, especially as we continue on through the volumes. It may also be because the way it showcases the streets is as a rough romantic setting. Yu is drawn to the streets as Bilbo and Frodo are drawn to seek out other cultures, ruins, and history of their world. Yu is drawn to the dangerous unknown, despite also being scared of it. Despite Holyland never coming here as a TV series, the panel style is quite cinematic, making it feel as though I was watching a movie. I like the feeling the art style gives me, giving it an intimate, up-close feeling. It may be evident that Mai is the love interest in the story, but I very much like how they handle her, even if she is more of a support role, especially later on. Kaneda Shinichi is another support role character that they handle well, even if we never get into his backstory. He is a very necessary character to Yu's development, and is very fleshed out in terms of how he interacts. He is opposite of Yu's personality, as I said before, and acts to counterbalance Yu's personality. It is interesting that at the end of the volume, they haven't spoken to each other for 2 months due to a natural awkwardness. I really like how Holyland as a whole tackles many very realistic things. The antagonists, while clearly the bad guys here, are not simple bad guys, as we will see, adding to the realism and believability. It is interesting how Masaki hunts down the thug hunter, and most of the important characters are there together at the main event. The first 5 chapters introduce us to the characters and build up to the main showdown, while the last 5 chapters focus on the main fight or showdown and its aftermath. The first chapter focuses on introducing Aizawa Masaki while only showing glimpses of our main character, though they briefly meet. The second chapter introduces us to Yu and his personality through seeing his thoughts and internal dialogue, which I like, as well as introducing us to Mai in a similar brief meeting as they don't know each other but are classmates. Rumors seem to be a continuing theme throughout the story, starting with them in the first chapter. Yu overhears classmates talking about rumors in the second one. In the third chapter we get a fight, fully from Yu's perspective, showing us and revealing to us what is really happening. He runs away to the arcade. In the 4th chapter, Yu meets and is saved by Shin, who proactively invites him to hang out after school at the arcade. They also run into Mai, who invites them to play or hang with them. In the 4th chapter, Yu seems to have found his place. The 5th chapter introduces Iwado and Judo, and sets up the beginning of the big showdown. We are also introduced to the leader of the thugs, Yoshido. Then commences the fight, which connects most of our characters together, and showcases Yu's ability for all to see. Chapter 6 drags out a bit in order to allow Masaki and his friends time to get to the fight. It is the only chapter that could be regarded as filler, but I believe it is well used in spite of that. Sometimes dragging things out a bit can increase the attention and drama of an event, making us look forward to it more, as long as it doesn't drag things out needlessly. Chapter 7 is well paced, making Yu look weak at first, up until the middle, when he surprises everyone. The fight isn't over yet, as Iwado fights him seriously in Chapter 8. Yu panics and gets caught and thrown. It is when many other people would have quit that Yu Kamishiro shows his true quality. He stands up and analyzes his opponent and his situation in Chapter 9. He attempts the only strategy he can think of, and due to a happenstance moment, it works, winning Masaki's admiration. In Chapter 10, Yu is defenseless, but luckily Masaki jumps in to help and defend him. Another stroke of luck comes when the police are on their way, prompting everyone to flee. Yu and Masaki introduce themselves properly to each other. Things return to normal for a time, ending the volume. The fight works to tear off Yu's layers, in order to show who he truly is on the inside. Yu is still an amateur and lacking in knowledge, but he taps into his innate strengths that he possesses. He finds the motivation and reason deep down for why he's resisting. He is more afraid of losing his place in this world than he is of pain. He mentions his everyday life of pain that he has had to endure. He's fighting for his right to exist. He's fighting for his Holyland, his right to a peaceful existence in a place he belongs. He's fighting for Shin, who is a part of that. He believes that if he doesn't resist, his Holyland will disappear. All in all, this is a great introduction that gives us a good sense of what to expect in later volumes. It sets up and pays off well. We are introduced to a number of the basics of martial arts and street fighting. The main characters are also introduced well and clearly. Exposition is well handled and spread out. It gives us a taste of the depth it goes into later. I especially found the characters very relatable and interesting, perhaps because the style of writing is perfectly suited to me. The art also expresses the characters well. The pacing works well too to propel us into the story while slowly gathering the information we need. I don't want to say too much more about it because there is so much more story to come. Stay tuned for the Volume 2 analysis to come, eventually. Be sure to comment, like, and subscribe, especially if you have a different opinion. I'd love to discuss almost anything with you guys in the comments. Well, see ya.